Picture yourself standing atop a limestone hill under the scorching sun of Attica. The year is 507 BCE, and you're witnessing a moment that will forever alter the course of human history. Thousands of Athenian citizens gather at the Pnyx, their voices echoing through the air as they debate their city's fate. This is the birth of democratia, the power of the people. Before this revolutionary moment, Athens had weathered centuries of political evolution. In its earliest days, the city was ruled by kings, followed by an aristocratic oligarchy known as the Eupatridae. These noble families controlled not only political power but also the religious and economic aspects of Athenian life. The common people, burdened by debt and lacking political rights, grew increasingly restless under this system. The first significant steps toward democracy came with Solon's reforms in 594 BCE. Appointed as archon with special powers, Solon implemented sweeping changes that laid the groundwork for future democratic institutions. He canceled debt slavery, freed many Athenians who had fallen into bondage, and created a system of law courts where citizens could appeal decisions made by magistrates. Importantly, he divided citizens into 4 property classes, tying political participation to wealth rather than birth, a revolutionary concept for its time. However, the path to democracy was not straightforward. After Solon's reforms, Athens fell under the rule of tyrants, most notably Pisistratus and his sons. While the word tyrant carried different connotations in ancient Greece than it does today, these rulers maintained their power through force and popular support rather than constitutional authority. Surprisingly, this period of tyranny contributed to democracy's eventual emergence by weakening traditional aristocratic power structures. The decisive moment came in 508–507 BCE with Cleisthenes' reforms. Following the overthrow of the last tyrant, Hippias, Cleisthenes emerged as a leader who would fundamentally reshape Athenian society. His most brilliant innovation was the reorganization of the citizen body into 10 new tribes, deliberately mixing people from different regions of Attica. This shrewd political move broke down old loyalties and created new civic identities centered on democratic participation. Cleisthenes established the Council of 500, Boule, with 50 members drawn by lot from each of the 10 tribes. This council prepared the agenda for the assembly, ecclesia, where all citizens could participate in political decision-making. The introduction of ostracism, where citizens could vote to exile potentially dangerous political figures for 10 years, served as a safeguard against the return of tyranny. The Athenian democracy that emerged was strikingly different from modern democratic systems. Citizens participated directly rather than through representatives. The assembly met at least 40 times per year, debating and voting on everything from foreign policy to religious matters. Many public offices were filled by lot rather than election, based on the belief that any citizen was capable of serving the state. Yet we must acknowledge the system's limitations. Citizenship was restricted to adult men born to Athenian parents, excluding women, slaves, and foreign residents, metics, who formed the majority of the population. The system relied heavily on slavery, which provided the economic foundation allowing citizens to participate in political life. The democratic experiment faced numerous challenges. During the Peloponnesian War, Athens briefly experienced 2 oligarchic coups. However, the resilience of democratic institutions and the citizens' commitment to their political rights ensured democracy's restoration each time. Under Pericles' leadership in the 5th century BCE, democracy reached its zenith, with the introduction of payment for public service enabling poorer citizens to participate in government. This revolutionary system influenced political thought far beyond its time and place. Concepts we take for granted today, equality before the law, isonomia, freedom of speech, isagoria, and accountability of public officials, were first systematically implemented in Athens. The idea that citizens should have a direct say in the decisions affecting their lives, that power should be distributed rather than concentrated, and that laws should govern rather than individuals, all trace their origins to this remarkable period in human history. The Athenian democratic experiment lasted nearly 2 centuries until its final dissolution by Macedonian power in 322 BCE. Yet its influence continues to resonate. When modern nations began to develop democratic systems in the 18th and 19th centuries, they looked back to Athens for inspiration. While we've modified and adapted these ancient principles to suit our larger and more complex societies, the core ideal, that the people should have a say in their governance, remains as revolutionary and vital today as it was when those first citizens gathered on the Pnyx to debate the future of their city. This ancient system challenges us to reflect on our own democratic practices. How do we ensure meaningful citizen participation in an age of mass society? How do we balance expertise with popular control? How do we protect democratic institutions from internal and external threats? These questions, first grappled with by the Athenians, remain central to democratic discourse today. The seeds of change in ancient Athens represent one of history's most fascinating political transformations. Before becoming the cradle of democracy, Athens experienced a tumultuous period under various tyrants who, paradoxically, set the stage for democratic revolution. This period of tyranny, far from being simply oppressive, created the conditions necessary for democracy's eventual emergence. In the 6th century BCE, Athens was a city divided. The aristocratic families, known as the Eupatridae, maintained a stranglehold on political power, while common citizens struggled under the weight of debt slavery and political disenfranchisement. This volatile situation created the perfect environment for the rise of tyrants, with Pisistratus emerging as the most influential among them. Pisistratus seized power 3 times between 561 and 527 BCE, finally establishing a stable tyranny that would last through his son's reign. While modern readers might assume this tyranny was purely oppressive, Pisistratus proved to be a remarkably shrewd ruler. He maintained the existing political structures created by Solon while wielding power through personal influence rather than institutional reform. His regime introduced several policies that would inadvertently lay the groundwork for democracy. Under Pisistratus, Athens experienced significant cultural and economic growth. He implemented programs that benefited small farmers, sponsored public works projects, and promoted religious festivals that united the community. Perhaps most importantly, his policies weakened the traditional aristocracy's grip on power by elevating new groups within society. He also introduced the practice of traveling judges who brought justice to rural areas, a system that would later influence democratic judicial reforms. Pisistratus's sons, Hippias and Hipparchus, inherited their father's power in 527 BCE. Initially, they continued their father's relatively benevolent policies, but everything changed after Hipparchus's assassination in 514 BCE. This event marked a critical turning point. Hippias, now ruling alone and fearful for his life, became increasingly paranoid and oppressive. His harsh measures alienated both the common people and the aristocracy, creating an unprecedented alliance against his rule. The crucial moment came in 510 BCE when Cleisthenes, a member of the powerful Alcmaeonid family, orchestrated a remarkable coalition. Understanding that domestic opposition alone wouldn't be sufficient, he secured crucial support from Sparta, then the most powerful military force in Greece. This unusual alliance, between Athenian aristocrats, common citizens, and Spartan warriors, successfully overthrew Hippias, marking the end of tyranny in Athens. However, what happened next would astonish everyone involved. Rather than establishing another oligarchy or attempting to seize power himself, Cleisthenes proposed a series of radical reforms that would fundamentally restructure Athenian society. The very forces that had combined to overthrow tyranny, the frustrations of the common people, the ambitions of reformed aristocrats, and the weakening of traditional power structures, created a unique opportunity for revolutionary change. The aftermath of the revolt revealed the deep political consciousness that had developed among the Athenian people. When another aristocrat, Isagoras, attempted to establish an oligarchy with Spartan support, the people of Athens rose up in unprecedented unity. They besieged Isagoras and his supporters on the Acropolis, demonstrating that they would no longer accept rule by the few. This popular uprising cleared the way for Cleisthenes to implement his democratic reforms. This period perfectly illustrates how revolutionary change often emerges from unexpected circumstances. The tyranny of Pisistratus and his sons, while autocratic, had inadvertently created conditions favorable to democracy. A weakened aristocracy, a more economically independent citizenry, and new social structures that crossed traditional boundaries. The subsequent crisis of 510 BCE, rather than resulting in another redistribution of power among elites, sparked a genuine political revolution. The seeds of change planted during this period would grow into something unprecedented in human history. The overthrow of tyranny in Athens didn't simply replace one form of autocratic rule with another. Instead, it opened the door to an entirely new concept of political organization, one in which the demos, people, themselves would hold kratos, power. This radical experiment would influence political thinking for millennia to come, demonstrating how moments of crisis can give birth to transformative innovation. The events of this period remind us that political change rarely follows a straight path. What began as a seemingly typical power struggle between aristocratic factions evolved into a revolutionary movement that would fundamentally alter the course of human political development. The seeds of democracy were planted in soil fertilized by tyranny, watered by crisis, and nurtured by the growing political consciousness of the Athenian people. The Cleisthenic Revolution stands as one of the most profound political transformations in human history. When Cleisthenes, scion of the powerful Alcmaeonid family, introduced his reforms around 508 BCE, he initiated a series of changes that would fundamentally reshape not only Athenian society but the very concept of political organization. Cleisthenes' most brilliant and far-reaching reform was his complete restructuring of Athenian civic society. Prior to his reforms, Athenians were organized into 4 traditional tribes based on family lineage and geographic location. These ancient divisions reinforced local loyalties and aristocratic power. Recognizing how these traditional bonds hindered political progress, Cleisthenes took the revolutionary step of dividing the citizenry into 10 entirely new tribes, phylae. This reorganization was masterfully designed to break down old allegiances and create new civic identities. The genius of this tribal reorganization lay in its methodology. Each new tribe was deliberately composed of citizens from 3 different regions of Attica: the city, Asti; the coast, Paralia; and the inland areas, Mesogaea. This mixture ensured that citizens from different geographic areas and economic backgrounds would need to work together in civic institutions. A farmer from the inland regions might now find himself voting alongside an urban craftsman and a coastal trader. This intermingling created new social bonds that transcended traditional family and regional loyalties, fostering a broader sense of Athenian identity. Building upon this new tribal structure, Cleisthenes established the Boule, or Council of 500. This revolutionary institution was composed of 50 members from each of the 10 tribes, chosen by lot. The use of sortition, random selection, rather than election was a radical departure from previous practices. It embodied the democratic principle that any citizen was capable of serving the state and helped prevent the concentration of power in the hands of the wealthy or well-connected. The Boule's responsibilities were extensive and crucial to the functioning of Athenian democracy. It prepared the agenda for the assembly meetings, handled foreign policy matters, oversaw military affairs, and supervised the many officials who managed the day-to-day operations of the state. Members served for 1 year, and no citizen could serve more than twice in their lifetime, ensuring broad participation in governance over time. Perhaps the most significant institution established under Cleisthenes was the Ecclesia, or popular assembly. This body, open to all male citizens over 18, became the sovereign political institution of Athens. The Ecclesia met at least 40 times per year on the Nix Hill, where citizens debated and voted on everything from foreign policy to religious matters. Any citizen could address the assembly, propose legislation, or argue against proposals. This direct participation in political decision-making was unprecedented and remains one of the most radical experiments in political history. Another innovative feature of Cleisthenes' reforms was the introduction of ostracism. This unique institution allowed the assembly to vote once a year on whether to exile a citizen for 10 years. Any citizen could be ostracized, but the process required at least 6,000 voters to participate, with the person receiving the most votes being exiled. This served as a powerful tool for removing potentially dangerous political figures before they could threaten the democratic system. Importantly, ostracism carried no additional penalties beyond exile. The person retained their property and citizenship, and could return after their term. Cleisthenes also introduced important judicial reforms. He expanded the role of popular courts, dikasteria, where citizens served as jurors. These courts had jurisdiction over both private and public cases, ensuring that the administration of justice was in the hands of ordinary citizens rather than aristocratic magistrates. The reforms also included measures to protect the new system from subversion. Cleisthenes introduced laws against tyranny and made attempts to overthrow the democracy a capital offense. These protective measures helped ensure the longevity of the democratic system, though they would be tested several times in the coming centuries. The impact of these reforms was profound and far-reaching. By reorganizing the very structure of Athenian society and creating institutions that promoted broad citizen participation, Cleisthenes laid the foundation for what would become the world's first democracy. His reforms created a political system where power truly resided with the demos, people, rather than with a privileged elite. The revolutionary nature of these changes cannot be overstated. In an age dominated by monarchies and oligarchies, Cleisthenes created a system that distributed political power among the citizen body as a whole. While the system had its limitations, notably the exclusion of women, slaves, and foreign residents, it represented a fundamental break with previous forms of government and established principles that would influence political thought for millennia to come. These reforms also demonstrate how institutional design can shape political behavior and social relationships. By creating new structures that encouraged cooperation across traditional boundaries, Cleisthenes fostered a new kind of political identity, one based on citizenship rather than family or regional ties. This transformation of Athenian political culture would prove crucial to the success and longevity of the democratic system. If you're fascinated by this journey to the origins of democracy, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Legacy of Empires channel for more content about the foundations of our civilization. To truly understand the revolutionary nature of Athenian democracy, we must examine how this complex political machinery operated on a daily basis. Picture a sophisticated mechanism where each component played a vital role in ensuring the smooth functioning of what was, for its time, an unprecedented system of government. At the heart of this political machine was the ecclesia, the assembly of citizens, which gathered at least 40 times each year on the Nix Hill. These meetings were remarkable spectacles of direct democracy in action. As the sun rose over Athens, citizens would make their way up the limestone steps of the Nix, a natural amphitheater carved into the hillside with a commanding view of the city and the Acropolis. The sessions would begin early, signaled by a rope dipped in red paint being drawn across the agora, gently herding citizens toward the assembly area. The frequency of these meetings, approximately every 9 days, ensured continuous citizen participation in governance. A typical assembly might attract anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 citizens, though special sessions could draw even larger crowds. The sheer regularity of these gatherings meant that Athenian citizens were constantly engaged in political decision-making, creating what was arguably the most politically active society in history. The procedural aspects of assembly meetings followed a carefully choreographed pattern. The day would begin with purification rituals and prayers, followed by the herald's proclamation, "Who wishes to speak?" This famous phrase embodied a fundamental principle of Athenian democracy, isagoria, or equality of speech. Any citizen, regardless of wealth or status, could take the speaker's platform, bema, and address their fellow citizens. This right to speak was considered so fundamental that those who attempted to prevent others from exercising it faced severe penalties. The lawmaking process itself was remarkably sophisticated. New proposals, sophismata, had to be submitted in writing to the council, boule, before being presented to the assembly. During debates, speakers would be timed using water clocks, clepsydra, to ensure fair distribution of speaking time. Voting was usually conducted by show of hands, chiratonia, though some matters required secret ballot using bronze voting tokens. The boule, or Council of 500, served as the engine room of Athenian democracy. Meeting almost daily in the Bouleuterion building in the Agora, this body managed the day-to-day administration of the city. Its members, chosen by lot from each of the 10 tribes, served for 1 year. The boule's responsibilities were extensive, preparing the assembly's agenda, handling preliminary discussions of all matters to come before the assembly, managing foreign policy, overseeing public works, and supervising the many officials who handled state administration. To ensure continuous operation, the boule was further divided into 10 committees called prytanes. Each prytany took turns serving as the executive committee for 1/10 of the year, with 1/3 of its members required to be on duty at all times, even sleeping in a special building, the tholos, to handle emergencies. This rotating system ensured that the machinery of government never stopped. One of the most distinctive features of Athenian democracy was the selection of magistrates by lot, sortition. Most administrative positions were filled this way, with terms limited to 1 year and most citizens permitted to hold an office only once in their lifetime. This system was based on the democratic principle that any citizen was capable of serving the state. Some specialized positions, particularly those requiring specific expertise like military commanders, strategoi, were filled by election rather than lot. The judicial system was equally participatory. The popular courts, dikasteria, involved huge juries of citizens, sometimes numbering in the hundreds or even thousands, chosen by lot each morning. These citizen jurors would hear cases ranging from private disputes to major political trials. To prevent corruption, jury selection was done through a sophisticated allocation machine, clariterion, that randomly assigned jurors to courts. Financial administration was handled through a complex system of checks and balances. Public finances were managed by numerous boards of officials, with regular audits and public accountability. The handling of public money was subject to strict oversight, with officials required to submit detailed accounts of their stewardship for public scrutiny. This intricate political machinery was supported by various auxiliary institutions. Professional scribes maintained public records, heralds announced official business, and public slaves performed necessary administrative tasks. The system also included numerous minor boards and committees handling everything from religious festivals to public works. To keep this massive political machine running smoothly, Athens developed sophisticated administrative procedures. Official documents were carefully archived, financial records were meticulously kept, and public notices were posted on wooden boards, axones, or stone stelae for all to see. The democracy even employed public timekeepers to ensure meetings ran on schedule. The success of this complex system relied heavily on citizen participation. To encourage attendance at the assembly, a payment, ecclesiastical mistos, was introduced in the 5th century BCE. This compensation helped ensure that even poorer citizens could afford to take time away from work to participate in governance. This intricate democratic machinery represented an extraordinary achievement in political organization. While it may seem cumbersome by modern standards, it successfully managed the affairs of one of the ancient world's most powerful cities for nearly 2 centuries. The system's complexity and sophistication challenged the common assumption that ancient political systems were primitive or simplistic. Indeed, in many ways, the Athenian democratic machine was more participatory and more directly democratic than many modern political systems. While Athenian democracy stands as a remarkable achievement in political history, it was a system fraught with significant contradictions and limitations that challenge our modern understanding of democratic principles. These complexities reveal much about both the strengths and weaknesses of the world's first democratic experiment. The most glaring contradiction lay in the very definition of citizenship. Athenian democracy was fundamentally exclusionary, with citizenship strictly limited to adult males born to Athenian parents. This requirement became even more restrictive after Pericles' citizenship law of 451 BCE, which demanded that both parents be Athenian citizens. The system that prided itself on political equality simultaneously maintained rigid barriers to entry, creating what scholars have termed an exclusive democracy. The numbers tell a striking story. In Athens' Golden Age, out of a total population of approximately 250,000 to 300,000 people, only about 30,000 to 40,000 individuals qualified as citizens. This meant that the vast majority of Athens' inhabitants had no political voice whatsoever. The rule of the people was, in reality, the rule of a privileged minority. Women's exclusion from political life represents one of the system's most profound contradictions. Despite Athens' claims to wisdom and justice, women were completely barred from political participation. They could not vote, speak in the assembly, serve on juries, or hold public office. Even wealthy women born to citizen families had fewer political rights than the poorest male citizen. This exclusion extended beyond politics. Women could not own property independently, conduct significant financial transactions, or even appear in public without male supervision. The position of metics, resident foreigners, presents another paradox. These individuals, many of whom were wealthy merchants, skilled craftsmen, or intellectuals, contributed significantly to Athens' economic and cultural prosperity. Yet despite their contributions, they remained politically disenfranchised. They paid special taxes, could not own land, and needed citizen sponsors to reside in the city. Even after generations of residence in Athens, metics and their descendants remained excluded from political participation. Perhaps the most fundamental contradiction was Athens' reliance on slavery. The democratic system's functioning depended heavily on slave labor, which provided the economic foundation allowing citizens to participate in political life. Estimates suggest that slaves comprised about 1/3 of Athens' population. These individuals, who performed everything from household labor to mining work, had no legal rights and were considered property. The freedom of citizens to engage in democratic governance was thus built upon the unfreedom of others. The influence of elite citizens presented another challenge to democratic ideals. While formal political equality existed among citizens, wealthy and well-connected individuals maintained significant informal power through networks of patronage and social influence. Elite citizens could afford better education, maintain political networks, and dedicate more time to political activity. They could also use their wealth to curry favor through public benefactions or by sponsoring festivals and dramatic performances. The system also struggled with the tension between democratic participation and political expertise. While the principle of rotation in office ensured broad participation, it could also result in inexperienced individuals handling complex matters of state. This was particularly problematic in areas like foreign policy and military strategy, where expertise and continuity were crucial. Economic inequality posed another significant challenge. Although political rights were equal among citizens, economic disparities remained stark. Wealthy citizens could more easily afford to participate in political life, while poorer citizens often struggled to balance civic duties with the need to earn a living. The introduction of payment for public service, mistos, partially addressed this issue but remained controversial. The democratic system also faced challenges in maintaining stability and preventing demagogy. The ability of skilled orators to sway the assembly could lead to hasty or ill-considered decisions. Historical examples, such as the disastrous Sicilian expedition during the Peloponnesian War, demonstrate how popular enthusiasm could override strategic wisdom. Corruption and abuse of power remained persistent problems. While mechanisms like ostracism and public audits were designed to prevent misconduct, wealthy citizens could still use their resources to influence decisions or escape punishment. The practice of sycophancy, making false accusations for political or financial gain, became a recognized problem in the judicial system. The treatment of Athens' subject allies within the Delian League reveals another contradiction. While Athens championed democracy at home, it often imposed harsh control over its allies, extracting tribute and suppressing revolts. This imperial democracy highlighted the tension between democratic ideals and power politics. Religious conservatism could also clash with democratic principles. The trial of Socrates in 399 BCE exemplifies how the democratic system could be used to suppress intellectual and religious dissent. The charges of impiety and corrupting the youth demonstrate the limits of Athenian tolerance and free speech. These contradictions and challenges remind us that democracy, even in its birthplace, was an imperfect and evolving system. The Athenian example shows how democratic ideals can coexist with significant inequalities and exclusions. Understanding these limitations helps us better appreciate both the achievements and failures of this first democratic experiment, while providing valuable lessons for modern democratic societies grappling with their own contradictions and challenges. The study of these limitations also highlights how far democratic principles have evolved over time, while reminding us that the struggle for genuine political equality and inclusion remains an ongoing process. Modern democracies continue to face many similar challenges, balancing expertise with participation, managing economic inequality, and ensuring genuine representation for all members of society. The echo of ancient Athens continues to reverberate through the halls of modern governments worldwide. More than 2.5 millennia after its inception, the Athenian democratic experiment remains a fundamental reference point for understanding and developing democratic systems. Its legacy extends far beyond mere historical interest, providing both inspiration and practical principles that continue to shape contemporary governance. The concept of isonomia, or equality before the law, stands as perhaps the most enduring legacy of Athenian democracy. This revolutionary principle established that no citizen, regardless of wealth or social status, should receive preferential treatment under the law. In modern democratic systems, this principle is enshrined in constitutions worldwide through concepts like equal protection under the law and due process. The Athenian understanding that justice must be blind to social status and personal influence remains a cornerstone of modern legal systems. Equally revolutionary was the principle of isagoria, the equal right to speak in the public assembly. This concept transcended mere freedom of speech. It embodied the right to actively participate in political decision-making. In contemporary democracies, this legacy lives on through protected rights of free speech, public debate, and political participation. Modern institutions like public hearings, town halls, and legislative debates all trace their conceptual roots to the Athenian commitment to open political discourse. The Athenian emphasis on direct citizen participation has profoundly influenced modern thinking about democratic engagement. While most modern democracies operate through representative systems rather than direct participation, the Athenian ideal of an engaged citizenry actively participating in political decision-making continues to inspire democratic theorists and practitioners. This influence can be seen in modern innovations like participatory budgeting, citizen initiatives, and referendums. Perhaps one of the most significant legacies is the principle of accountability in government. The Athenian system of regular audits, public scrutiny of officials, and the ability to remove corrupt leaders has shaped modern concepts of governmental transparency and accountability. Contemporary practices like freedom of information laws, public auditing, and impeachment procedures all reflect this ancient commitment to holding power answerable to the people. The Athenian concept of citizenship, despite its historical limitations, has profoundly influenced modern ideas about civic responsibility and political rights. While modern democracies have rightfully expanded citizenship to be more inclusive, the Athenian ideal of the engaged, informed citizen participating in public life remains powerful. This legacy can be seen in contemporary emphasis on civic education, public service, and citizen responsibility. The Athenian judicial system has also left an indelible mark on modern legal practices. The use of citizen juries, public trials, and the right to legal defense all have roots in Athenian practice. The principle that justice should be administered by ordinary citizens rather than solely by professional judges continues to influence legal systems worldwide. Another enduring legacy is the concept of checks and balances in government. While not as formally structured as modern systems, the Athenian practice of distributing power among different institutions and using various mechanisms to prevent abuse of power influenced later democratic theorists, including the American founding fathers. The Athenian approach to political debate and deliberation continues to influence modern democratic practice. The emphasis on reasoned argument, public discussion of important issues, and the need to persuade fellow citizens through logical argument rather than force remains central to democratic theory and practice. Even Athenian political terminology has left its mark on modern democracy. Words like politics, democracy, rhetoric, and citizen all have Greek origins and reflect concepts first fully developed in ancient Athens. This linguistic legacy reflects the enduring influence of Athenian political thought. The failures and limitations of Athenian democracy have also provided valuable lessons. The exclusion of large segments of the population from political participation serves as a reminder of the importance of inclusive citizenship. The potential for demagoguery and hasty decision-making in direct democracy has influenced the development of representative systems with deliberative safeguards. Modern technological innovations are creating new opportunities to implement aspects of Athenian direct democracy that were previously impractical in large nation-states. Digital platforms for citizen participation, online voting systems, and social media as forums for public debate all reflect attempts to realize ancient democratic ideals through modern means. The Athenian legacy also includes the important recognition that democracy is not just a set of institutions but a way of life requiring ongoing citizen engagement and commitment. The ancient understanding that democratic systems require an educated and involved citizenry remains crucial for modern democratic societies. Furthermore, the Athenian experience demonstrates that democracy is not a fixed system but an evolving process. The continuous refinement and adaptation of democratic practices in Athens provides a model for modern societies as they work to improve their own democratic systems. The Athenian legacy reminds us that democracy, while imperfect, represents humanity's most ambitious attempt to create a political system based on citizen participation, equality before the law, and accountable governance. As modern societies continue to grapple with challenges to democratic governance, the principles first developed in ancient Athens remain not just historically interesting but practically relevant. What do you think Athenian democracy can teach us today? Share your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to like to support our historical rescue work. The Athenian democratic system stands as one of history's most remarkable political experiments, continually evolving throughout its existence. During the Golden Age of Athens in the 5th century BCE, under the leadership of Pericles, the democracy reached its zenith through a series of groundbreaking reforms that would influence political thought for millennia to come. One of the most revolutionary innovations introduced during this period was the Mystaphoria, a system of payment for political participation. This groundbreaking concept meant that common citizens could afford to take time away from their daily work to participate in the democratic process. By providing compensation for civic duties, Athens ensured that democracy wasn't just the privilege of the wealthy, but truly a system for all free citizens. The strengthening of the popular courts, known as dikasteria, represented another crucial development in Athenian democracy. These courts, staffed by ordinary citizens chosen by lot, handled everything from minor disputes to major political trials. With panels sometimes numbering in the hundreds or even thousands of jurors, these courts embodied the Athenian belief in collective wisdom and justice. Perhaps one of Pericles' most enduring legacies was his commitment to expanding cultural access through public funding. This initiative, known as the Theorikon, provided funds for citizens to attend theatrical performances, festivals, and other cultural events. This wasn't merely entertainment. It was considered essential for developing informed, culturally aware citizens capable of participating meaningfully in democracy. These innovations transformed Athens into a vibrant participatory democracy where citizens were not just voters, but active participants in governance, justice, and culture. The system recognized that true democracy required both political rights and the practical means to exercise those rights. By removing economic barriers to participation, Athens created a more inclusive political system that engaged citizens across social classes. The Athenian example demonstrates that democracy is not a static system, but rather a living institution that must evolve to meet the needs of its citizens. The introduction of payment for public service, the empowerment of popular courts, and the funding of cultural participation were radical ideas in their time, yet they addressed fundamental challenges that still resonate today. How to ensure broad participation in democracy, how to maintain justice that truly represents the people, and how to cultivate an informed and engaged citizenry. These ancient innovations continue to inform modern discussions about democratic participation, civic engagement, and the role of culture in political life. While we may not directly copy the Athenian model, its core principles about removing barriers to participation and fostering an engaged citizenry remain relevant to contemporary debates about strengthening democracy. The Athenian democratic experiment reminds us that creating a truly participatory democracy requires both institutional structures and practical support for citizen engagement. It shows us that democracy is not just about voting rights, but about creating conditions where all citizens can meaningfully participate in political life. Through this examination of Athens' democratic evolution, we can see how a society grappled with fundamental questions about citizenship, participation, and governance. Questions that continue to challenge democratic societies today. The Athenian experience provides valuable insights for modern democracies as they strive to become more inclusive, participatory, and responsive to citizens' needs. The Athenian democratic experiment continues to provoke profound questions about the nature and practice of democracy in our contemporary world. As we grapple with modern political challenges, the ancient Athenian experience offers valuable insights that merit careful consideration. The question of balancing direct participation with representation stands as one of the most pressing challenges facing modern democracies. The Athenians practiced a form of direct democracy that would be logistically impossible in today's large nation-states. However, their commitment to citizen engagement offers important lessons. While we cannot replicate the Athenian assembly where thousands of citizens gathered to debate policy, their example challenges us to think creatively about how technology and new forms of civic engagement might enable more direct citizen participation in political decision-making. Modern democracies must navigate between the efficiency of representative systems and the democratic ideal of citizen participation. The Athenian model suggests that we should perhaps look beyond traditional representative democracy to explore hybrid systems that combine professional administration with meaningful opportunities for direct citizen involvement. This might include participatory budgeting, citizen assemblies, or digital platforms for public consultation. The role of education in forming capable citizens emerges as another crucial lesson from Athens. The Athenians understood that democracy requires more than just voting rights. It demands an educated, engaged citizenry capable of thoughtful political participation. They recognized that political participation was a skill that needed to be developed through education and practice. This raises important questions about our own educational systems and their role in preparing citizens for democratic participation. In our era of increasing political polarization and misinformation, the Athenian emphasis on citizen education becomes particularly relevant. How can we ensure that citizens have the critical thinking skills, historical knowledge, and civic understanding necessary for meaningful democratic participation? The Athenian experience suggests that democracy requires an ongoing investment in citizen education and development. Perhaps most critically, the Athenian experience prompts us to consider how democracies can protect themselves from their own internal contradictions and weaknesses. Athens ultimately struggled with questions of inclusion and exclusion, the tyranny of the majority, and the tension between democratic ideals and practical governance. These challenges remain relevant today as modern democracies face similar issues of voter suppression, minority rights, and the balance between popular will and constitutional protections. The Athenian system also highlights the importance of institutional safeguards. While Athens had mechanisms like ostracism to protect against potential tyrants, modern democracies must develop their own tools to preserve democratic institutions while remaining true to democratic principles. This includes addressing challenges like campaign finance reform, electoral integrity, and the influence of special interests. Looking at present-day challenges through the lens of Athenian democracy reveals both the persistence of certain democratic dilemmas and the possibility of innovative solutions. The Athenians developed creative institutional responses to political challenges, from payment for public service to sophisticated judicial systems. Their example encourages us to think boldly about democratic innovation in our own time. Furthermore, the Athenian experience underscores the importance of civic culture in sustaining democracy. Beyond formal institutions, Athens cultivated a rich civic life through festivals, theater, and public discourse. This suggests that modern democracies must also nurture the cultural and social foundations that support democratic practice. The legacy of Athenian democracy reminds us that democratic governance is not just a set of institutions or procedures, but a way of life that requires constant renewal and adaptation. As we face contemporary challenges from climate change to digital transformation, the Athenian experience encourages us to think deeply about how to evolve our democratic systems while preserving their fundamental principles. While we cannot directly transpose Athenian solutions to modern problems, their experience provides valuable perspectives on the perennial challenges of democratic governance. Their successes and failures offer insights for contemporary efforts to strengthen and renew democracy, reminding us that democracy is not a fixed system but an ongoing project that requires continuous reflection, adaptation, and commitment. And so we conclude our journey to the origins of democracy. If you were impressed by the political genius of the Athenians, leave a like, share this video with friends interested in history and politics, and comment which aspect of Athenian democracy most appeals to you. Surprised? Don't forget to subscribe to the Legacy of Empires channel and turn on notifications to continue exploring the roots of our civilization. Until the next encounter with history.